This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. So much to talk about today. I'll be joined in just a little bit by Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune columnist. We are going to talk a lot about Gophers men's basketball, the future of that program, who is going to coach next season, and what needs to change regardless of who is in charge of that program. But first, what did I miss? Well, you guys, we've talked a lot about the negative of the Timberwolves on this podcast already since it started. The inaugural episode of this show was February 1st. Since the inception of the show, the Wolves had gone 2-15 until Thursday night. Now, just lest you think I was some sort of jinx or something, they were 5-14 before that. Not like they were lighting the world on fire, but they were 2-15 in their last 17 games since this podcast started until Thursday, second half of the season. We talked about this on Thursday's show with Chris Hine. Could they change the narrative of their season? Could they find some positive momentum, do some things right, start to see some progress from Karl Anthony Towns, from Anthony Edwards, from some of these other young guys? Well, just one game, but wow. 30-point victory over New Orleans on Thursday, 135-105. I'm not sure what the better sign is, the 135 or the 105, because I think all along we thought the offense would get there under new head coach Chris Finch. What wasn't clear was whether they were going to be able to find any kind of defensive consistency. The defense had looked really bad. The effort level had looked bad, particularly in Finch's first 5 games as coach before the break. Well, it was a night when everything kind of went right? They made almost 50% of their three-pointers on 40 attempts. Jaden McDaniels had 20 points. Jalen Noel poured it in. He had 27, something like that, off the bench. So, one of those nights where everything seems to be going right, so we don't want to draw too many conclusions from it, but certainly better than it had been by a mile. It's a team that didn't really resemble the one we were used to seeing in the last, in the last 6-7 weeks, and really the whole season here. They moved the ball in the way that they wanted to. Anthony Edwards took some of the messaging, I think, from Finch, was driving the ball more instead of settling for jump shots, and he seemed genuinely happy finally after the game. Let's see, since we played so many negative sound bites from this team this year, let's play a positive quote from Anthony Edwards after that game.
Damn, we got to win. We were having fun. We're trying to get used to it for real. I feel like I'm trying to get used to it. So whatever we did this game, we need to grow and build on that.
And again, good to be happy right now, right? They deserve to be happy to win a game. But I'll be most curious to see how much this is sustainable, right? Because now, they just played New Orleans. New Orleans is not a good team. They're certainly better than the Wolves. They've won 15 games this year. They're basically twice as many wins as the Wolves. But now the Wolves' next 5 games, 2 against Portland, both home games here, then at the Lakers, and then 2 at the Phoenix Suns. The Trailblazers games and the Suns games are back-to-back. So they're coming fast and furious now. A stretch of 5 games in 7 days, a couple sets of back-to-backs. Can they sustain that energy? Can they sustain that defensive intensity? Can they keep making shots and moving the ball? And, kind of keep that positive momentum going from that first game of the second half of this season. Before we get to Chip Scoggins, too, I want to point you guys to a couple things that caught my eye Twins-wise. Lavelle E. Neal III, longtime Twins writer, now columnist, wrote a piece in today's paper, Friday, StarTribune.com, about kind of a little observations of different things he saw down in Florida. And whenever Lavelle, has a bunch of things to say about the Twins, we should listen because he knows that team, back and front. I guess he's trying to say don't panic about Miguel Sano. He's got time to figure out his swing. It's been a tough start to the spring for Miguel, though. He's saying Miguel, I think right now, is hitting 143, no homers, no walks, 7 strikeouts. That's what he enters Friday. Those are his stats entering Friday. He says in Lavelle's estimation, Sano is in shape, but basically, this is a guy who 2 of the last 3 years hit 199 and 204. And I know he walks a decent amount to offset that, but there's been 2 disappointing seasons out of the last 3. I think 2019 part of the Bomba squad. That was his, probably his best year overall in the majors. Had that 923 OPS, career high 34 home runs. But we're still waiting, by and large, for him to emerge, if he's going to emerge as a consistent threat. And it's been, so long. It's been 2015 was his debut, you guys. This is his 7th season. He's never had more than 495 plate appearances, kind of showing you the injuries, the ineffectiveness, kind of how back and forth he's been. This is a long time to wait. Is he just kind of what he's going to be right now? Are we waiting for something that's not going to happen? I don't know. I mean, he's 27. He'll be 28 in 2 months. This is a guy who should be entering the prime of his career. If he's not figuring this out right now, when is he going to figure it out? The other thing I want to mention, since Sano and Byron Buxton often get mentioned in tandem, especially when they were coming up as prospects, Buxton, I couldn't believe it the other day when I saw the news that he had basically cracked his tooth, needs a root canal, eating food. I think it was a steak maybe. So he's going to miss a little bit of time. Just reminded me of Patrick Royce being on Monday's show saying he's not worried about the Byron Buxton injury bug. 3 days later, Buxton has to miss a little bit of camp anyway with the cracked tooth and the tooth issue. Small problem. He'll be back soon, but nonetheless, it speaks to again the worry you have with Buxton. It's that something always seems to happen that keeps him off the field. He hasn't been able to be a consistent performer either. When he's on the field, absolute game changer, right? He's so dynamic in the field. He changes things, at the plate too. He can run, he can do all these things, but if he can't be out there, if he can't stay on the field, that's a problem. So we're gonna see about these two guys again this year. We've been waiting on both of them for what seems like a really long time. Buxton made his debut in 2015 as well. Still hasn't really emerged as that consistent threat, at least health-wise. So, let's see. Let's see what happens this year. I've got more promise for Buxton than I do for Sano, but both of these guys, it feels like it's been a long time. Is this the year that they are consistent performers, or is this the year we just decide they kind of are what they are and something is always going to happen to Buxton and Sano is never going to completely figure this out?
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Excited to be joined right now by Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune columnist. He's been on Richard Pitino watch for a little while here, I think, and just kind of waiting to see what happens with this story as Friday continues. But as of recording this segment early Friday morning, Richard Pitino is still the head coach of the Minnesota Gophers basketball team. So what I want to get into with Chip today is, I don't want to speculate too heavy, but I do want to get into the notion of if they do move on from Pitino, which is it all indications from what we've heard is that is, if you had to bet on one thing, that's probably the thing you're betting on, is that they are going to make a change at head coach, even with the buyout, even with the uncertainty that brings. If they do make a change, who might we see in charge, and what does that person have to do next season to succeed at Minnesota? So let's kind of start there, Chip. Maybe you can tell me what you know as of Friday morning, and kind of as you've talked to people around this program or who observe this program, what do they see with the potential for it, and also kind of the steps moving forward?
Yeah, I think right now we're just in holding pattern. I didn't think that Mark Cole would make announce a decision or talk to Richard last night after the game. Typically what happens is the AD meets with the coach if there is going to be a firing the next day. And so I think it's reasonable to think that Cole, because there is so much speculation about Pitino's job, he's been asked about it so many times. I don't think it's something you would delay. I think it's something you would get to first thing Friday morning. So my guess is those two will meet Friday morning, and I do anticipate they'll make a change. I know Cole really likes Pitino as a person. I've had a number of conversations with him over the years. He really respects him and likes him. In a buyout at a time during a pandemic when finances are tough over there, $1.75 million. But after 8 years, I think the there's just a sense of it's time to move on and try something different. It would be hard to sell to a fan base right now that you're going to stay put and stay the course. I assume they're going to have fans back in the barn next year. And so if you were not to make a change, I think you run the risk of really losing some season ticket holders if there is not a change. So I think we will see a change as far as what this program needs, because there hasn't been a real high level of success with this program historically.
You gotta go back to Clem to find anything like that's even beyond just one NCAA tournament win.
And the times that they did, they took a banner down. And so I talked to some people who are familiar with the program. I'll say coaches who know this state, that program, this conference, about this job. And I had a number of people tell me, and I think it's probably pretty obvious that if you're ranking Big Ten jobs, this is not in the top half. I mean, it's just not. And so I think there are inherent benefits of this job in terms of the talent base in this state. Minnesota's become a basketball state. I mean, it's far better than it was even 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so there's a really deep recruiting base here. You got a new facility. I will tell you, people who are outside observers think the barn Williams Arena is a detriment, not a plus because of its age and just I don't think recruits are going to be enamored with the history of Williams Arena.
No, that's fair.
But in terms of where they go and what they do, they need a coach who's going to connect better with the high school coaches, recruits, and AAU programs. I'll tell you, Pitino might be my favorite coach I've covered in 21 years here in terms of just a human interaction.
Yeah, he's great. He's a great guy. He's an engaging quote. He's an interesting person. He will,
He's accessible.
Yeah.
He doesn't take himself too seriously. He's self-deprecating. He understands it. He gives you insight. I thoroughly enjoyed covering him, but for whatever reason, Mike, it just did not click with the coaches in this state and the recruits. And not to say he didn't get any. He got Daniel Tour and Mir Coffee. And so there's this perception he gets none. Well, that's not true, but there's just been enough recruiting misses and mistakes. And there's just not, when you're losing Dawson Garcia to Marquette, and you're not going to get Jalen Suggs and Tyus Jones and Gary Trenton Jr. and probably Chet Holmgren to come to this program right now. You need long-term history of success before recruits are going to consider that. But that next tier, the Dawson Garcias, Ben Carlson's, McKinley Wright, who they didn't take. They took Isaiah Washington over him. That was an all-timer. Those are the athletes. Those are the players I think if you can get consistently, and the roster doesn't have to be 100% Minnesotans. It can get it from, but when you miss on a Dawson Garcia, it's almost like it's magnified. So I think recruiting will be a huge step, and I think if when we hear from Mark Cole, I think that'll be something he talks about, and more than that, just consistency. I mean, the ebb flows with Pitino's program, and some of that was injuries he can't control, and guys leaving early, and guys getting in trouble and getting kicked off. But
that's college basketball, though, Chip. I mean, that's everybody.
You know what? 2021 college basketball with the transfer portal, your roster is going to look like it's in flux from year to year to a degree. But it just seemed like his program never had the depth of talent because when they had an injury or a loss or whatever, personnel loss, things just went down the tube at the end of the season. So I think you just need to find somebody that can sustain more consistency in this program.
Is that possible? I mean, we've talked about, like you said at the outset, it's been a while since anybody has established that. They've tried, when they fired Clem, but Dan Munson came in, then they had Tubby Smith after that. Now it's been, Richard Pitino since then. Is it that this, not that it's not possible, but different people have tried different kind of formulas here and nothing has really stuck, at least at building a winner that you would say, okay, that's a program that's, that's got a shot to go to the Sweet 16 every year, kind of the Wisconsin level, as opposed to, hey, they might go to the tournament every 2 or 3 years.
Well, I will say there's two things that are different now than that. I don't know. You can say, well, historically they haven't won here, so things have changed. One, basketball in the state is much better than when Dan Munson was here. It's a different product. I mean, You got more Division I, Big Ten caliber players here. So that just from Dan Munson, that's different. Two, they have a brand new practice facility that was a major detriment up until Pitino, and even part of Pitino until they got it. I mean, that Athletes Village, having access to a your own facility where you're not sharing Williams Arena and different things, and you can't get in there to practice. That's a major upgrade that will help you in recruiting. So I think the program is in a better spot than what we've seen traditionally. And so I think there is potential here to build more consistency and be a program that can reasonably expect to be in the NCAA tournament more than occasionally. Pitino's been there, a couple times. And so I don't think it's unrealistic to think that with the kind of the infrastructure that the program has now, that you should set the bar higher.
Pitino's team shot a lot of 3-pointers this year and didn't make a lot of 3-pointers, and that was even the story in the last game Thursday. They played hard. They almost beat Ohio State. Ohio State's kind of slumping right now, but still a team that's going to make the NCAA tournament field. They only lose 79-75. They're right in it to the end, but 8 of 32 from 3-point range. Yeah. And I keep my joke on Twitter was that if they went out, at least they went out doing something they love, settling for and missing 3-pointers. I guess that's a long-winded way to set up how it felt like the style that he eventually wanted to play didn't match the recruiting. Is that more a function of systems, of not quite wanting to know what you want to do? And is that something a new coach could do better?
Well, I would say that is the hallmark of his entire regime here, 8 years. I went back through his 8 seasons, and I looked at where they ranked in the NCAA nationally in both just overall field goal percentage shooting and then 3-point shooting percentage. And in those 8 years, only one year did they finish in the top 100 nationally. The other 7 years, they were in the 200s and 300s. So they were, not just this year, but throughout his time, a really poor shooting team. And at a time, particularly 3-point shooting, I mean, this year they're 330th or whatever nationally, at a time where the 3-point shooting has never been more important at all levels of basketball. So he just did not, for lack of a better word, he just didn't find enough shooting in recruiting. You have to find shooters. And so I think that will be, now is that offensive system that didn't put players in position to, shoot at a high level, at a high percentage? Was it not having enough depth in your roster? So when you had injuries or whatever, guys that came in were just not good shooters. Or was it you just, when you were in recruiting, you didn't value that enough in terms of maybe you looked at something else? I think it's probably a combination of all those things. So I think when you look back at it, I mean, it's hard to, when you're finishing 250 or 300 or 310 nationally in shooting and overall shooting and 3-point shooting, you can't win consistently that way. It's too difficult. And so I think that'll be something the next coach will have to address in recruiting and with his offensive systems.
As you think about next steps, 2 things come to mind. One, the search for Pitino, which was undertaken by the previous athletic director, Norwood Teague, was a nightmare. It was, I think they eventually found an okay choice. Like we said, I like Richard Pitino. I think he did an okay job here. I think he was maybe I don't even know if he would say it, but he was awfully young and inexperienced when he got a Big Ten job. So that was not their first choice, wasn't even probably their third or fourth choice. They kind of kept going down the line. How much different will a Mark Coyle run search, or I guess targeted search, be for a new coach, if indeed that's what happens here?
Well, I will say in Coyle's high-profile hirings, PJ Fleck, Lindsey Whalen, Bob Motzko, he has got the number one person on his list every time. Is he going to be able to do that this time? I don't know. I think money's going to play a factor with this search because of the buyout pandemic. Are you going to be able to get in a bidding war for a coach this time? Probably not. But if I'm running this search, my absolute first call is to John Beilein, and I make him tell me no. Probably will tell you no, but until you call him, I think he absolutely has to be your first phone call. Eric Musselman would probably be my second call. What he's, his connection to this state and the program. Obviously, he's had success at multiple places. What he's doing at Arkansas right now, they're a top 15 team. He would be expensive. You'd probably have to pay $3.5 million. Arkansas would fight to keep him. I don't know how realistic that is. I don't know his buyout, but I'm sure it's significant. But I do think, Mike, this job will be attractive even though I said it's not top half of Big Ten. It is a Big Ten job that's going to pay $2.2 million. So if you're a mid-major coach, Porter Moser at Loyola Chicago, Dennis Gates at Cleveland State, Brian Dutcher, Craig Smith at Utah State, a local Minnesota connection, Nico Medved, a Minnesota guy at Colorado State. This is a step up. This would be you would be having a job in the premier college basketball conference this year. So I think Coyle, who is pretty connected. He doesn't use search firms typically. He knows what he wants and who he wants to go after. And so I don't know if he'll get his number one choice, but I think you should be able to hire someone who is a sitting head coach somewhere at a mid-major who's had success, and you feel like this is not a huge step up for them, that they're going to be, okay, we need 5 years for him to kind of grow in a job. I don't think they're going to be in that situation this time.
Who's your first call in that regard then? If Beilein is your kind of, is your dream hire, but he might have his pick of whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
If, Musselman is either too expensive or would be harder to extract of that more gettable tier, who's your first call?
I think the first two that I would put right there are Porter Moser and Dennis Gates. Now, Porter Moser is at Loyola Chicago, took him to the Final Four 3 years ago, like miracle run. They're back in the tournament again this year. And then Dennis Gates is interesting. I've been doing research on him. Cleveland State, longtime assistant for Leonard Hamilton at Florida State, highly regarded, gets the Cleveland State job 2 years ago. Basically, when he comes there, because of the previous coach, like 90% of the roster left. He had no players, basically. And in 2 years, they're in the NCAA tournament this year. They won the Horizon League. They're in the NCAA tournament. So he is a black head coach. So we know the track record with Minnesota and their lack of diversity in the department. The one thing with Dennis is in doing research, his wife has a high-level position at Boston College in their athletic department, I think. And I believe Boston College has a coach opening. I don't know.
Do the math there, maybe. Okay.
Yeah. So it might, and I think that he is going to be a hot name now because of what he's done at Cleveland State to get them in just no time at all into the NCAA tournament. I think those two, but then the other three, Craig Smith, Nico Medved, and Dutcher, I think are the three with local ties who are sitting head coaches. I think they would deserve consideration too.
Interesting that Dutcher wasn't higher up on that list. There's been an assumption, I think, because of that local connection, because of how he structured his buyout at that school, that maybe he is more of a front runner. Is that not how you see it?
Well, he could be for Mark Cole. He's 62, right?
Yeah.
And he is. I wonder with Dutcher, and he obviously structured his buyout to go from $5 million to $1 million because he would want this job. He's got a pretty good setup in San Diego. He's been there for a long time. Maybe he would view this as a chance to finish his coaching career here. And I don't think he would be a bad choice, but I think if I'm looking at somebody, quite frankly, a little bit younger, who might connect with recruits in a different way, I think I might give that a shot. But I also think if they hired Dutcher with his love of this program and history and knows this state, I also think that he would be obviously a hire that I think could win here.
Last thing for you, Chip. Great stuff today as we kind of continue to monitor this this story too. As you think about, going forward, next steps, and when you talked about how this isn't necessarily a top half job in the Big Ten, then how do you, outside of recruiting and kind of selling, the new facilities and stuff, like how do you build that program that if you haven't had that level of success, like where do you then, where do you even start? Is it just kind of, stacking years on top of each other?
Yeah.
Is it possible, I guess, to do what everybody wants to do with this program, which is to kind of build it into that Wisconsin type, we're going to go to the tournament every year and we're going to have a chance to go far in the tournament every year?
It starts as everything starts in college sports, starts with recruiting. You have to upgrade your talent, and you can't have as many misses as they have had here the last few years. And they've had successes. Daniel Overturu, Amir Coffey, they're playing in the NBA, so it's not like it's been 100% misses, but recruiting. And if you do that and you start to win, then all of a sudden this becomes a more attractive option for recruits, and it just sustains itself. Then the next year, you get into the NCAA tournament, and recruits here see you as like, hey, I have a chance to go play in the NCAA tournament and stay home and play in front of my parents and play in the top conference, and I don't need to go, outside the borders. You're not going to get every recruit that you want. I mean, you're going to have losses. I mean, it's just nobody gets everybody that you want. And so, but I think if you can start to make more inroads with recruiting, and you have more to sell now with the Athletes Village and, a new coaching staff, I think that's where it starts. When I covering college sports, to me, everything always comes back to recruiting.
All right, man. Good stuff. We'll be following this story. I'm sure it's not going to end anytime soon. Even if they make a decision on Pitino, we will have a whole search to unfold after that. So follow Chip's work on Star Tribune, StarTribune.com, and we'll talk to you down the road again, Chip.
Thanks, man.
Good stuff from Chip Scoggins, as always. He knows the Gophers so well. Really plugged in on that scene. So hope you guys enjoyed that discussion with Chip, and we'll obviously be monitoring this story for the days to come as we go forward. Let's end things with the cooler. Sounds like Governor Walz is going to give some guidance Friday about outdoor gatherings. Now, we think that might involve capacity at Target Field, at least for the initial part of this season. So pay attention to that on Friday. See what he's going to say. If you remember the show from a couple weeks ago, I had Rochelle Olson on saying the Twins are hoping to have 10,000 fans at the opener at Target Field, and then gradually build from there. We'll see if that's the number that the governor and the state of Minnesota have in mind, or if they start a little lower and work their way up from there. But nevertheless, it sounds like things are trending in the positive direction, and that you should probably anticipate being able to see a Twins game at Target Field at the start of the year, and more of you to be able to see that as the year goes on. That'll do it for today. Thank you for joining me on Daily Delivery today and all week. Got some good stuff coming up next week. I can already tell you, I think Lindsay Whalen is going to be on one of the shows next week. We'll do some bracket stuff, hopefully with Marcus Fuller, as we talk about, filling out your bracket and doing that as best as you can. We got Vikings new league year, free agency starts. I'm sure there'll be plenty of that talk as well. Download, subscribe, read Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. I'm Michael Rand. We will catch you again on Monday.